Well, good evening, and welcome to Scarecrow Labs. Happy to... the bumper music was way low. Yeah, I tell you, I seem to have a lot of problems with volume these days. It's like, early on I was talking to Sterling, and I was saying, hey, it's hell getting old, and considering the alternative, I think I'll just keep on getting older, and I think some of my pre-recorded video segments are feeling the same pains. But how is everybody tonight? You all ready for an interesting presentation? We're supposed to have Peter Lindemann on as our featured guest tonight. I think a lot of folks are looking forward to that. But for right now, I have waiting in the wings. Actually, I'm not sure where he is. He's certainly not in his normal abode. He's obviously someplace out on the road. But let me bring on Sterling Allen with This Week in Free Energy. Stand by. Well, as usual, it's not a Scarecrow show if I don't hit a wrong button at some point or another. Obviously, I played the wrong bumper there. How you doing tonight, Sterling?
Doing good. Gary, how you doing?
Not too bad. Now, where are you? You're obviously not in your official man cave where you usually broadcast from, so tell the folks where you're hiding out these days.
I'm in the Salt Palace, Salt Lake City, at the Master of Influence conference by Three Key Elements. They do a phenomenal job, and they do have a special for that show. If you're interested, let me know. We can give you a good ticket if you get it by the end of Saturday. This is about the fourth one of these I've been to. They're phenomenal about how to use your God-given talents more effectively. And hopefully we can put this to use in helping roll out our stuff better than we have in the past. That's the objective. This is kind of a business trip, but it doesn't have anything to do with free energy, other than maybe the energy of the soul.
Well, is this the powers of persuasion type thing? Is this is that what this is about? Because I went to a whole bunch of these things, back in the 80s, where they told me how to win friends and influence people and how to properly carry my key to the executive washroom. Is that
kind of stuff? But I would say that it's on a more fundamental, and the principles are more sound. But it's along those lines.
All right. Well, in any case, we're interested in hearing This Week in Free Energy. So I'm going to let you have full screen and take it away, sir. It's all yours.
Okay. Well, I finally got around to doing my LENR Weekly. It's actually been 3 weeks, so there's a lot of information jam-packed in there.
Yeah, I'll take you to task over that after the show.
Yeah, you miss a week on this, and it starts piling up pretty quick. And I missed 2 weeks, so this week's, or this almost month's, highlights include Dennis Cravens did a presentation down at the NI Week. That's National Instruments Week. That was they have been a very strong proponent of LENR from the very beginning. The CEO of that company has been a real thumbs up kind of guy, and actually they provide their instrumentation measurements and whatnot for people who are serious researchers, and either at a low price or could even be gratis or whatever, just their way of chipping in on the whole thing. So that demonstration we saw, for example, a month ago with Defcalion was measured by their stuff, lab view, I think you call it, and also they had their instruments, hardware and software. Thousands of dollars of equipment they just chip in. And speaking of Defcalion, there were several more reports and commentaries on their demonstration, and a report that they did at the ICCF 18. And there are more reports on that ICCF 18, where ICCF stands for International Cold Fusion Conference. I bet they'll change the name of that, because the name fusion in cold fusion is going out of vogue, because most likely it is not fusion. It's probably transmutation, if that. It's definitely some kind of a nuclear process because of the amount of energy that's coming out, but not sure exactly what's going on yet. The science is still catching up with the observations, the theory, I should say. Andrew Rossi's talking about the minuscule amounts of nickel that are required in this process. People are asking hypothetical questions. What would happen if the whole world transferred over to LENR processes such as his to power the planet? What would our nickel consumption be at? And he kind of put some numbers to that, quite interesting. The Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project has formed a charity for live open science. There's several stories on that. And Mitch Schwartz over at NANOR talked about NANOR's potential, and he shows that, I think they call it a regen or Rogan chart, where they show the energy density and the amount of energy that's coming out, and they compare to fossil fuels and other conventional energy sources, and they show that the LENR is way off the chart in terms of its power density and potential output. So that is a
I think we've had a momentary connection
5
glitch
to 10.
with Sterling. Sterling, whoops, it just dropped again. We had a little bit of a connection glitch. I'm going to turn my video off to you and see if that cures the problem. But the last couple of sentences you said got lost because we dropped the connection.
All right. I was saying that in this report, there are between 5 and 10 new news organizations reporting on LENR. That was quite interesting. There's probably the biggest surge in new news organizations talking about it that I recall since I've been doing these weekly reports for about a year and a half. Actually coming up on 2 years now. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Sometimes it scares me.
Yeah, you and I have been doing this show like 3 years almost now.
Yeah. That's something.
Yeah.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Yeah, that's what people keep asking.
Where the hell is my flying car and my robot slave, Sterling?
Yeah, I know. You get breakthrough burnout. It's hard not to get burned out on all the exciting stuff coming just around the corner, and that corner just gets longer and longer and longer. When's it ever going to show up? Moving on, I did do a link to that blog that I posted over at PezWiki about this Chuck Pierce. He's got that regen technology, self-loop motor generator technology, 17 kilowatts supposedly, and a few developments in that little saga. He's little dialogue back and forth between himself and myself, and also he's talking about some patents information, and I think you'll see some skepticism coming out of me on that. I always like to give people a chance to prove themselves, and I still hold out that he could yet prove himself, but not really looking that good. Kapinadze, the guy over in the Republic of Georgia, as opposed to the U.S. Georgia. This is the German or the Russian Georgia. That's old former Soviet bloc. Teriel Kapinadze, he has that solid state power generation technology. We talked about him 3 or 4 months ago, and when I went to that trip over in France, up in the Alps, that was a guy who had replicated one of Kapinadze's technology. And they've posted 9 new videos about their technology. They're actually not new videos. Most of them are repeats.
I was about to say, a lot of that material I had seen previously.
Yeah, including one that was supposedly a third-party test of a large power output. They had these huge Tesla coils and whatnot. Quite interesting. So it's just, that's actually been up there for almost a month now. I've been, having that in my hopper, wanting to get the news out there. Finally got it out. Gadgetman Group has been on your show, Ron Hatton, feeling the noose tightening. He's claiming to have some things that look like suppression going on, bugs being placed in his house, break-ins, the police writing him off or shrugging off his reporting of break-ins and whatnot. As I did an interview with him, you definitely get another side of the story that doesn't come through in the synopses, that maybe he's got a wife that's mad at him for some substance abuse. There's some of that going on, maybe some own worst enemy stuff going on, but there could also be some sabotage or other things going on. So anyway, it makes for some interesting coverage, and he's looking for some money for some defense funds and whatnot to try and clear his name or whatnot. It has some of the same issues that our buddy Eric Dollard with meth and whatnot. He claims to have been off all that stuff for many years, which kind of he words it as kind of forced back onto it with this recent surge of activity. He gave into the craving or whatever. So it's kind of a sad tale of what's going on there, but there does seem to be some interference going on that is kind of pushing him into that behavior. Rosemary Ainsley, we mentioned last week, had put up some reports, and apparently her new test results from her most recent testing do not confirm her 2002 thesis. So basically she's kind of withdrawing her claims, not that this stuff will work, but that this apparatus is going to accomplish the fulfillment of that thesis. She's still not backing down from that thesis. And then finally, want to mention that, actually, this is not finally, there's a couple more things. Our friends over Global Breakthrough Energy Movement, they're doing that conference this coming October in Boulder, October 10th through 12th, at University of Colorado. They have an amazing magazine called Pulse, and give you a link to go check it out. Of course, you can't read all the text. It's a small print. Basically, it's just a visual on the layout, and it looks like they've done a really professional job. I'd encourage you to subscribe to that.
By the way, Sterling, I'm sorry to butt in there, but on that Breakthrough Global Energy Movement issue, I want to thank members of this audience who apparently saw fit to toss a few bucks in the hat over there. They've been on a fundraiser trying to raise enough money to put this show together in Colorado. I think they're trying to raise like $30,000. Now, I noticed after they did the Smart Scarecrow show, they did get a fairly substantial jolt in their donations. I sure hope that continues. I really do want to support these guys, and I hope that this audience sees fit to help them out. Let's make this a really first-class show.
Yeah, you can go to Global BEM for Breakthrough Energy Movement, globalbem.com, and you can see the donate button over there. And speaking of donate button, I'm going to be throwing up ours again. Time to throw the hat out again. I appreciate some of the support we've gotten that has enabled us to pull the hat in for about 3 months. And so you can be looking for our hat out there among the hats that are out. We really appreciate all you guys' support in helping these different endeavors out there. Without your support, these things would fizzle away. So keep up the great work in that regard. The least you can do is rub some nickels together and toss them in the hat. And finally, I want to mention a story that got me pretty excited. It's more along the mainstream clean energy sector. But the thing I like about this story is this a home power distributed energy scenario using natural gas, diesel, biodiesel, fuels that are available already in the grid. This would be cheap. It would be also efficient, super efficient, clean, nominally clean, I should say, cleaner than most power nowadays. It would cost 90% less than currently available. It's the fuel cell, solid oxide fuel cell technology. And they're talking 2014 having basically a dishwasher-sized device that would produce 25 kilowatts. And so that's pretty cool, moving in the direction of getting distributed power. So rather than building these huge natural gas power plants, you build the power plant at people's homes where they use the power, and makes us much less susceptible to grid disruptions and other things that could come along in society. So
yeah, but the problem is J.P. Morgan can't put a meter on it, though, Sterling, so that ain't going to work.
Oh, they'll find ways with all these technologies nowadays. But yeah, we're moving away from the central authority to individual responsibility, and people taking control of their lives and sticking it to the man. And that's what free energy is all about, is freedom. It's power to the people. And that ends this week in free energy. Thanks, Gary.
What? Wait a minute. You left me about 5 minutes short. All right, I guess I'm going to have to get my dancing shoes on. Sterling had a short presentation. I figured with all that, LENR stuff, man, you'd be good for half an hour tonight.
Well, we could probably, if we went through all those items, we could stretch this out a bit longer. I've got my notes here, but people can go there, and I like to just basically give a few of the highlights from that.
All right, for anybody who missed it, Sterling's site is pesn.com or PESWiki, PESWIKI.com. All the articles that he discussed are linked in on one of those pages. So if there was something he ran through a little bit quick and you want to go see the dirty details on it, that's how you find the information. That's it, Sterling. That's all you got.
Well, I might as well mention just a couple of things from that synopsis. Our friend Dr. Bob, he calls himself, you get a picture of him standing next to Dennis Cravens at the NI Week, and he gave a whole bunch of reports on that conference, did a good job. He's quite an entertaining writer. He likes to throw a picture of his little stuffed dog in almost every report that he does, and it's kind of funny. It's like, where's Nemo, or where's finding what is that?
Waldo. Where's Waldo?
Yeah. Waldo. Yeah, where's Waldo? He likes to throw that puppy dog image in all his pictures. But anyway, he did some great reports there. Also, there's some controversy about Defcalion. Apparently, some questions about the results and some pulling out of a European interest. Also, they're talking about going public in the stock exchange this year. It was one of the stories that came up. So a lot of news on Defcalion, more than normal, and quite a wide variety of coverage on them. And also, we did some coverage on Nanospire. That's Mark LeClaire, who was on your show not too long ago.
Yeah, I don't think we've had Mark LeClaire on this show. It might have been 6 months. It's about time to kick him in the butt and find out why he hadn't done a show. He ought to have something to discuss by now.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of shows, I had a phone conversation today with Jeff Miller, who we featured last week in our news. He's that guy he's got like 100 things that he's built or replicated.
Oh, Lord. Has he completed any of them?
He's completed quite a few of them. He's replicated Joseph Newman's device, supposedly. Yeah. Most of this stuff is in carcass shape right now because he had to consolidate 3 labs into one, and he's really compact. I had a friend of mine go and visit him 3 or 4 days ago. Was very impressed. He definitely is the real deal. He really knows his stuff. He's very smart, knows how to build stuff, has built stuff. He doesn't really have a lot right now that he can show you running. There's a Bedini wheel, but we've all seen those. A lot of us have built those. That's about the extent of what he can demonstrate right now because of his cramped space. But there were about $1,000 of donations that went his way because of our audience kicking in. We really appreciate that. Your audience on this show, he really appreciates all the phone calls and emails and interest that he's getting. So that one looks really good, and he's willing to come on your show. And it sounds like we might have him on in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll see about schedule early in September. Let's see how that goes. It's kind of far out there, so I guess we'll try to firm it up with him. Let's see what he's got to tell us.
Well, yeah, 2 weeks out. That's a long time for you. I know.
Well, there have been times when I've had bookings penciled in for like 6 weeks, but the problem is you get them booked in that far in advance. By the time you actually get to the date when that person's supposed to be on, something else has come up or whatever. And I understand. So I have learned to be fast on my feet, and I always make sure I got some dancing shoes in the back just in case. Well, Sterling, if that's it, I guess I'll let you go, man. You got more of this conference to go through, or are you done
I
now?
do. I'm missing it right now.
Okay. That's why you wanted to cut out early. All right. Well, I'll let you out of here. Thank you very much for your presentation, Sterling Allen. Good night, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. And that was our presentation from Sterling Allen this week in Free Energy. And I know there are people in the audience who love Sterling. There are people in the audience who hate Sterling, and there's a lot of people who are in between. I don't care. It's irrelevant. The man is very professional, comes on here every week, gives us the latest dirt on what's going on in this wild and wacky world of free energy. If you really want to support the effort, one of the ways you can do it is to donate a couple of bucks to those who you think are going to best move the efforts forward. If you think dropping 10 in Sterling's can and maybe 10, 15, 20 in the Breakthrough Energy Movement's can is going to do some good, you should. Let's face it, there are no government grants for this. There are no big corporate sponsors. If we want to move this stuff forward, it's up to you. It's up to you. Well, tonight we have a very special presenter. We're going to have a presentation from Peter Lindemann. Now, for those of you who've been under a rock for the last 30 years, Peter Lindemann has something of a reputation in this genre. I mean, the man's been around for a while. He's published a lot of material that I found interesting, some of it downright intriguing, some of it I considered absolute bullshit. But, my opinion, and $5 get you one of them foofy coffees over at Starbucks. This guy has produced a wealth of interesting material, and he comes to us from a conference that he just gave, I believe it was in Idaho. I think Zero Fossil Fuel in the audience tonight also attended that presentation. And I think what we're going to get to see tonight is something of a synopsis of the presentation he did at that conference in June. So if you'll stand by for just a moment, I think I'm going to try to select the proper bumper this time. Let's see if I can hit the right button. And I'll see about bringing Peter Lindemann in, so please do stand by. Please do stand by. I'm having a little difficulty getting Peter Lindemann in here. The connection's giving me some fits. So just stand by. Okay, I lost you. I'm gonna. Okay, I'm hearing echoes of myself. Let's see here. One, two, three. Yeah, I'm getting very distinct echoes of myself. I've killed my video feedback to you. I'm going to go ahead and bring in, introduce you. If we have another drop like that, I will ask you to go ahead and. Oh, there it went. All right, I'm dusting off the dancing shoes. Skype is giving me fits. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go with no video. We're going to do an audio-only presentation. I seem to be having a devil of a time maintaining a connection with Peter Lindemann, so please do stand by. I'll be bringing him on just momentarily here. All righty. If this happens one more time, I'm going to go to the landline. I'll tell you what. Go ahead and kill your video, and let's try this audio only. I'll go ahead and put you up as an avatar.
Okay.
All right, folks. I'm sorry about the delay. We are having a little bit of difficulty with Skype tonight. You know how it is. These modern technologies and conveniences are absolutely wonderful when they work. I think I had him for a moment there, and I lost him. I'm at this point. I'm bringing him in via landline. I think we may just give up on Skype. Skype's being problematic.
Good evening, this is Jackie.
Yeah, hi Jackie. This is Gary Hendershot. I was looking to get Peter live, and it's been kind of fighting me here.
Yeah, hang on just a minute. Peter, Gary Hendershot's on line 1.
How's this?
Well, I tell you, it may just be as good as we're going to do. For some reason, Skype is fighting me, man. It seems like I keep wanting to throw you a rope and pull you in because we get all connected, all ready to go live, and then boom, you drop.
Yeah, it's very odd because it was looking good, and then it just quits.
Yeah. Did you forget to give donuts to the guys in the black Suburban out in front of your house? Now, I gave donuts to my guys.
Yeah, I may have forgotten that. It's been a busy day.
Oh, man, it's donuts with pink sprinkles. If you don't do the donuts with pink sprinkles, they mess with you.
Oh, well, now you know. At least now I know.
Well, in any case, right now I've got a still image of you up on screen. I don't know if we really want to try battling with Skype anymore. It was being very problematic. At this point, we've got good audio. I would say, please, let us hear what you have to tell us. That was your cue. You were supposed to take it away. What did I do here? Did I?
Hi.
You know, now the landline's giving me fits. This is not good. This has not been fun tonight, Peter. This is your fault. You forgot the damn donuts, man.
This is more trouble than I've had in the last 5 years.
I'm not sure what's going on. I'll tell you what. You go ahead and get started, and right now it looks like we got a good connection. You go ahead and get started. I'm going to run out front real fast, give those guys in the black Suburban a couple more donuts, and see if maybe I can get them off. Maybe it's on my end. I'll see if I can get them off our back.
Well, we'll find out. Very good. Hello, everybody. My name's Peter Lindemann. I've been involved in free energy research for about 35 years. First got interested in the early 70s when I heard a little bit about Ed Gray's motor. But what I wanted to do...
For those who don't know Ed Gray, and Ed Gray's name comes up every once in a while, and I don't think there's anybody I've had on this show who understands what Ed Gray's motor was all about and what intimately enough to give us a little bit of an explanation. Can you give us an executive summary of just what this thing was and what it did?
Sure. Yeah, it was the first really amazing story that came up through the ranks in my lifetime. In 1973, a number of articles appeared in the secondary news sources, and they were talking about an 80 horsepower electric engine that produced 80 horsepower mechanical and kept its batteries charged at all times. That was a pretty remarkable feat. And this guy was in Southern California in the Los Angeles area, and so that was the story that I heard about. And he also had a little power supply that seemed to run the engine, but it would also light light bulbs that you could put underwater and not get shocked when they were on. So you could. It was one of his demonstrations that he wasn't using ordinary types of electricity, and so this is what kind of got me started on the quest for free energy. When I tried to contact the company, they basically told me that they couldn't tell me anything else other than what was in the news stories because of their stockholders and so on. So I started trying to figure out what else was going on. And back in the 70s, there was no internet, there was no, and basically nobody would tell you anything. So, I mean, now you've got Sterling Allen coming on every week and giving you, updates on things, what's happening around the world, and there was nothing like that. So, anyway, I started looking into free energy, and in those days, and like what we just heard from Sterling, a lot of the news was just about specific individuals working on a specific type of invention that would operate as a fuelless power plant, or something that had anomalous or advantageous behaviors, and that was always the story. There have been some of the classic stories from years ago, Victor Schauberger and Thomas Henry Murray, and some of these other names that were just about most of the story when I started in the 70s. And these inventions were extraordinary and obviously had been suppressed in the sense that we couldn't go to the store and buy one. Many of these suppression things really had to do with the fact that that they were never brought. The technology was never developed, beyond the research stage, and sometimes that had to do with lack of funding or other interferences. But usually, what showed up was the fact that there really wasn't interference in a lot of these situations. A lot of the stories that have come down as the folklore are embellished considerably by people who only know a little bit about the story. But in general, people who are brilliant at doing research on the bench usually don't know much about business, and so there's a very complex set of real reasons why a lot of these things haven't come forward. But what I found in all of this was that as I continued to look at specific inventors, trying to find specific inventions, and then the analysis process was, does it work or doesn't it work, that became too simplistic for me. It didn't seem to, many of these technologies had complexities to it or operational principles which were not well understood by me or even the inventor sometimes. And so there weren't really any experts to talk to. But when you would bring these the stories of these technologies to anybody who had a science degree or a university professor or anything, the rebuttal to these things was always the same, that these types of machines simply broke the laws of thermodynamics and therefore they couldn't possibly be genuine, and that was pretty much the end of the story, and they didn't feel that they even needed to go and investigate these things because it was obviously a hoax. And so my response to that over the years was I started looking into thermodynamics. What was the history of thermodynamics? And because I wanted to understand where these ideas of thermodynamics came from and why it was constantly being used as a stone wall so that people would be disincentivized to look at these technologies.
Now, my understanding of the history of the so-called unmutable laws of thermodynamics is that these were really formulas that were put together to try to explain how a steam engine works. Is that not the case?
Well, pretty much. I mean, the steam engines started showing up in the early 1700s. And these were linear devices with a piston and a big rocker arm, and usually they were operating a pump to pull water out of mines and things like this. This was the first use of these devices. They weren't even set up to turn a wheel. They were just really a steam pump. And for the first 70 years or so.
And obviously, if you were a manufacturer of pumps for mining operations, it would be in your interest to try to figure out what would make a better pump so you could get one up on your competition. And I understood that was kind of how the laws of thermodynamics came about, was to explain the operation of a steam engine and perhaps suggest ways to get better efficiency or more power or whatever. And that's really where this unmutable law came from.
Well, pretty much. There were a couple people whose contribution were the most important, but generally before the steam engines, you basically just had horses, hitched to a big circular corral type thing that were, turning, a big rotating apparatus that was running the pump, and so the whole idea of the horsepower as a rating of energy actually came in during this early steam engine period. In other words, if you're a steam contraption that would burn wood, could replace 4 horses, turning a pump, then that, by God, was a 4 horsepower pump.
Sounds like 4 horsepower to me.
That sounds like 4 horsepower. So I mean, it started very, crudely, and but by the 1770s, a gentleman in England named James Watt, figured out how to make one of these rocker arm type of steam piston devices, and instead of just running a linear pump, he actually figured out how to cam it off to turn a wheel, and that was the first real steam engine, and that was in about 1776. And before this time, you see, this is the engineers running way ahead of the theorists, because there was no math, there was no theory as to how this would work. All of that came later.
So for many people in academia, if you came and explained to them that you had this gizmo that you threw wood into, and it turned a wheel and could actually pump a mine or something like that, they'd look at you and say, hey, that's not part of my lexicon. It's not in my understanding of physics. Therefore, by definition, it must be a fraud.
Well, actually, they were far more, utilitarian.
Are you telling me that academia in those days was perhaps more advanced than they are today, and were willing to consider outside the box influences?
Yeah, they were more open to because this was a tremendous breakthrough. In other words, in those days, science to kind of rise to the top of the scientific hierarchy was to become what was called a natural philosopher. In other words, science was always a series of observations of how nature worked. But if you actually got to the point where you not only understood how nature operated by observation, but you actually could predict what nature would do, then you were considered to be someone who understood the philosophy of nature itself, you see. And that brought you up to the level of being a natural philosopher, which was like the highest you could get. Today, the highest you can get is kind of like a theoretical physicist, okay? But back then, the highest you could be was really to have a deep understanding of nature. And, people had been working with fire, since, prehistoric times. And they had been powering boats with sails in the wind for, from prehistoric times, and it was the Romans who actually figured out how to pump water to a higher level by putting a big paddle wheel in a river and using the power of the river going by to pump water higher. So they were always looking for ways of harnessing energy from the natural world, and so and the reason they didn't harness heat before the 1700s is because they really didn't know what it was. And they didn't have the metallurgy, and they didn't have the theory and the math. So, because it was pretty weird, because if a fire got out of hand, it could burn your house down. It could burn the village down. So there was a lot of resistance to trying to tap into the possibility of using heat as an energy source. So basically what happened is that during the time of James Watt's engine, obviously, because they didn't have any math and they didn't have any metallurgy, in other words, they didn't know how strong the metals had to be before the boiler would blow up. So a lot of people were blowing up boilers, and it was dangerous. People were getting killed by running steam engines, and so another brilliant inventor.
Luckily, at that point, we didn't have OSHA.
We did not have OSHA.
Or all endeavors would have stopped right then and there.
Exactly. We would still be whipping our buggies, really, our horses around. Exactly. They would have put a quick end to it. But in the early 1800s, a gentleman named Robert Stirling invented a hot air engine, which rivaled the early steam engines, and it didn't need a boiler. And this was going to be a big improvement, because there was no part of the engine that would have a tendency of blowing up, and that was really good. And then by 1825, a Frenchman named Sadi Carnot wrote a small pamphlet called "On the Motive Power of Fire," and in that publication, he was the first to set out the mathematics, which are still used today, to engineer all heat engines. Okay, and that was in 1825. And the fundamental understanding.
Now, be clear, by a heat engine, you're talking anything from a jet engine to a big V8 to a drag racing motor to the 6-cylinder in my 12-year-old Buick.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
These are all heat engines.
These are heat engines, right? Engines that run on the explosive power of some burning fuel. That's right. And the primary thesis of Carnot's publication was that the Stirling engine was inherently more efficient than the steam engine. And what's interesting today is that we can buy little gasoline generator sets that will make power in an emergency and things like this, and none of them use Stirling engines. Okay, every time someone has tried to bring a Stirling engine to market, it has been pretty much disallowed. There are hundreds of thousands of toy Stirling engines. You can buy a Stirling engine that will demonstrate that it works, on the heat from your coffee cup, but you cannot buy a Stirling engine that will run a generator and do something practical for, like powering your house in an emergency or anything else. And so there has definitely been an effort to keep the Stirling engine out of the economy. And this is just one of the facts of history. Exactly why that's true. Of course, the naysayers and the trolls in the chat will probably say it's because they're not as efficient, but they're very efficient. And in fact, Ford Motor Company developed a four-cylinder Stirling engine in 1976, which outperformed their V8 in every way, and also ran on any fuel that you threw in it. You could throw turpentine and isopropyl alcohol in the tank, and it would burn just fine. And they were never able to bring that engine out in a car either. So the idea that Stirling engines aren't efficient and they don't work well and there's problems and all sorts of things, that isn't the real historic answer why we don't have them. But the point is that Carnot's work was about determining how to use heat as a source of energy to make mechanical energy, okay, and the math to do that. About 15 years later, an Englishman named James Joule came up with the opposite idea. He wanted to prove that you could take other forms of energy, like electricity, like heat, like mechanical energy, and turn it back into heat. So he ran a series of experiments, including his most famous one, where he just spun a paddle wheel in water and measured how much it warmed up the water. And this is the basis of how much mechanical energy they currently say it takes to produce heat. And so this was the beginning of the understanding of thermodynamics, where they decided that all forms of energy were interchangeable, and that you could take one form of energy and convert it into another. And so James Joule's primary paper on that was called On the Mechanical Equivalent of Heat. And he really was trying to prove that you could convert mechanical energy back into heat, whereas Carnot's work was to prove that you could take heat and turn it into mechanical energy. So once there was an understanding of these reversible processes, that you could take mechanical energy and turn it into heat, you could take heat and turn it into mechanical energy, and with Carnot's math that was used by engineers to actually make useful heat engines, this formed the basis of thermodynamics as we know it today. And this is why what's come forward is a whole series of ideas that different forms of energy are interchangeable, that there's specific rates of exchange between these different energy forms, and that there's always losses in the machine, like bearing friction and other losses. So no matter how much you put in, you can't get quite that much out, and that's why you can't build a machine that runs itself because there's always these losses.
Well, Peter, to an old Southern boy with straw for brains, that all makes perfect sense to me. Because if you've got what everybody out there is going to be real familiar with is the suck, squeeze, pop, fooey of a 4-stroke gasoline engine.
Right.
Okay, and you got piston rings. You know that they're in contact with the walls of the cylinder. You know there's going to be some friction loss. You know that the mechanical motion and the combustion of the fuel are going to generate heat that you have to dissipate. All this all makes perfect sense to somebody who looks at the typical prime mover that we deal with every day of our lives. Sure, there's going to be friction losses. So, where's the beef? It all seems to make perfect sense.
Exactly. So the idea is, it's reasonable, for, many people to believe that the laws of thermodynamics say that you can't have a free energy machine. Okay? So, the problem with that is this: the energy commerce that we just described. Okay, let's say I'm going to put gasoline in my gas engine, and I'm going to what I call the preferred output of the machine is the mechanical force that the engine produces. Okay, and then the what we'll call the irretrievable loss will be all the extra heat it makes that wasn't converted into mechanical energy. And we know with standard engines, we've got heat coming out the tailpipe. We've got heat coming out of the cooling system. The block gets hot. What's under the hood gets couple 140 degrees in there. So there's an awful lot of heat that wasn't converted into mechanical energy by that process. And in fact, you can look it up almost anywhere, and most gas engines operate in the 20 to 25% efficiency range as far as taking the heat equivalent of the fuel and turning that into what we'll call the preferred output, which is the mechanical energy that we're looking for from the engine. So we have settled for a heat engine which is admittedly 25% efficient. 20 to 25% efficient.
And those are the good ones. I can tell you, I've got a little gasoline generator here that if it's 17% efficient, that's a good day.
Fine. Okay. And this is the point. And the thing is that for a society and for an economy that has ostensibly sent men to the moon, and now you have a smartphone that you can do video calls on and all this stuff. The question is, why are we still using these ancient, totally inefficient prime movers that were developed in the 1800s? This is a reasonable question to ask, and what comes from that question is not a pretty answer, and it basically boils down to that there are economic reasons for these things, that somebody is making money, and they don't want anything better to come out, and that's what would be called a closed market. Okay.
Now you're telling me that if buggy whip manufacturers had a good strong lobby in Washington, Henry Ford wouldn't have had a chance, eh?
Well, that's the perfect equivalent of what we're talking about. Exactly. That for some reason, and I'm not a historian on the politics of all of this, and I'm not an economist. But it's reasonable that if you want to know what's going on, you follow the money, because that's usually the prime indicator of who did what, when, and where, and it's unreasonable. We're not using slide rules in physics class anymore. We're not even using calculators. Everybody's got a calculator now in their phone. Everybody has a camera in their phone, a 75,000 apps in their phone. Okay? In other words, when a market is open to innovation, the innovation is ferocious at this point in history. So why isn't innovation in prime movers that ferocious? And that is a reasonable question for any of your listeners to ask. And what it boils down to is that most people don't understand the history of thermodynamics and what has really developed in the last 40 years in thermodynamics, which is a whole new set of understandings of how heat behaves under specific circumstances, called open system thermodynamics. And actually a Nobel Prize in chemistry was given to one of the most important researchers in that field. His name was Dr. Ilya Prigogine. And so this is open system thermodynamics is absolutely mainstream stuff. It's won a Nobel Prize. It's very important to know that there are other situations whereby heat and other energies behave in different ways than the classical thermodynamics that came out of the 1800s. And so that was...
Are there examples in nature of this? I mean, if I was going to try to get a picture in my mind of what open system thermodynamics might look like, I mean, can you draw on an example from nature that people might be able to identify with about how one of these systems would look?
Sure. Prigogine had two basic principles, and one of them was what he called energy organization, and the other was energy dissipation. And so energy organization would be any situation where energy would gather to a higher concentration. And energy dissipation was the opposite, obviously, anytime energy would be dispersed into the environment. So, and he basically showed that nature had an inherent ability to cause what he called self-organization of energy systems. For instance, under normal circumstances, on a summer day, the temperature's 85 or 90, and there's certain clouds in the air, and the wind is, the breeze is maybe 5 to 10 miles an hour, and that's sort of a standard, way the weather can be. But under certain circumstances, the weather can self-organize into, hurricanes, tornadoes, all kinds of things that, nobody paid for, and nobody put up big fans to force them to do it. And, but the thermodynamics of the natural world allowed these energies to self-organize to very, very high levels of energy, and then they would dissipate again. So that's one example of how the natural world actually allows for a wide variety of energy density situations to occur.
So now, the characteristics are, again, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm trying to get a picture in my head here. So these systems have to be self-organizing in some way? Is that the characteristics? I'm trying to define characteristics here.
Good. Okay. So there's two basic principles that we look at in open system thermodynamics to describe what a free energy machine might look like. Okay, and those two principles are: one, is the input of the machine open to environmental energies? Okay. In other words, it's not just the gas that I'm putting into it, okay? In other words, is there some other energy input coming from the environment that I don't have to pay for, okay? That would be one.
Wind, solar, whatever.
Wind, solar, heat, a wide variety, magnetism, gravity, centrifugal force, a wide variety of either direct energies or forces from the environment that can be leveraged to create a force multiplication or a force multiplier in the machine. Okay, and we can look at a design, but also there's a possibility of having a system in the machine where after the heat or the energy form moves through the machine, there may be some left that didn't get converted into what we'll call our preferred embodiment. Okay, so in other words, if we had on our automobile engine, for instance, since we know that about 80% of the energy is coming out as heat instead of mechanical energy to drive our wheels, for instance, so if we found a way to take the heat coming out of our engine and use that to, say, boil some water to run another steam engine to add to creating more mechanical energy, then that would be a way of recycling or using the energy again. Okay.
Okay, so now you've gotten from 20% efficiency to 26% efficiency.
Well, maybe we can get up to 50. Or
yeah.
But what I'm saying is we're looking at a principle here that sometimes energy is considered dissipated or not used by the system to create what we want, but we can use another system to gather that energy up to another usable form and get more out of it. So the two basic principles that I always look for are there any reasonable inputs from the environment, and are there any ways that we can take energy moving through the system and recycle some of it to use a second time? Okay? These are very simple ideas. Okay? Now, a really good example of something like this is I can give you an example of this with a tabletop water distiller. Okay, most people who are listening on the call have probably seen one of these things. You plug it in; it's got a heating element. You put your tap water in, you seal it up. The heating element boils all the water, and it comes out through a cooling system that's usually run by another electric motor and a fan. So then that takes a little bit more electricity, and then so that condenses the steam down and it gives you the distilled water. So that in that situation, you are using the heat that you're producing from the electricity that you're buying from the wall. You're boiling the water, then you're using a little bit more electricity to cool the water off, and that's what the distiller does.
And of course, being an old Southern boy with straw for brains, I might use an apparatus like that, but not to make water.
Yes, exactly. And yes, in other words, you can heat and boil other interesting fluids. Correct. In your backyard.
And that stuff that comes out of my gizmo could power my truck.
Precisely.
But I wouldn't waste it on that.
Exactly. But here's what I want to suggest to the listener, you see, when it comes to an open system thermodynamic design for a water distiller would look more like this, is that a cold water source would be heated to the, would actually go through a heat exchanger first, and then it would come up to a little heating element that might run on electricity that would boil the water, and it would go through the steam loop, and then to condense the water back to the distilled water side, what I would do is I would take the heat that's already in the steam and use that in a heat exchange system to preheat the incoming water that we're about to boil the next time. You see, so in this way I can take the heat that it takes to make the steam and recycle that heat over and over and over and over again. And then all I have to do with the heating element is to put in the small amount of heat that was lost because of inadequate insulation and the differences in the temperature of the incoming water and the water that ends up in my distilled water tank, okay, which would be the real heat losses in the system. So my heating element would only have to make that up, and so you can make a tabletop distiller that operates on that principle that only uses maybe 20% as much electricity as the first one we designed, and that was because we used an open system thermodynamic model and reused the heat as often and as many times as we possibly could by simply recycling it.
But
and using it again.
still, such a system doesn't even approach 100% efficiency. I mean, to be fair, I mean, even some of the solar stills, and I have experimented with such things. If you really look at their overall efficiency, now the nice thing about a solar still, of course, is that it's using energy that I didn't have to pay out of my pocket for. But still, when I look at the actual amount of energy going into the system compared to what I can pull out, I'm far from reaching a break-even point. Are there any magic black boxes that might break that and make the laws of thermodynamics passé?
Well, here's the thing, Gary, and I think this is, what you just described, and I think this is where a lot of your listeners are also misunderstanding the point that I'm trying to make, and that is that free energy is the use of energy that you don't have to pay for. Okay? Now, we're not trying to, we don't imagine that we're going to build a loss-free machine. Okay? There's going to be losses in any machine. There's going to be friction and moving parts. There's going to be insulation losses. Heat's going to escape, and we're not going to be able to get it back. These are what Prigogine called real energy dissipation. Okay? And that's what moves towards entropy, for those scientific people who understand these words. But, it's important to understand that you don't need a machine to, quote, run itself, unquote, to have access to free energy. Free energy is literally the use of any energy to do something that you want done that you don't have to pay for. Okay? That is free energy.
Well, now my counter argument would be today, if I wanted to go out to Walmart and pick something up off the end cap that I could deploy immediately, if I wanted to put up some sort of a quote unquote, in air quotes, free energy system today, probably my best bet would be solar.
Right.
Now, granted, once I got that solar up on my roof, I don't have to pay a monthly bill for the energy that I draw off the sunlight. But the upfront costs are pretty nasty, and compared to that same energy that I might buy off the grid, my break-even point's going to be way out there. 10 years maybe. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So so I'm while it sounds great, to say, hey, I'm green, I got all these solar panels on my roof, and I'm pulling energy from the sun. Aren't I a real greenie? In fact, I have laid down a hell of a lot of green to be that green.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I don't recommend that people do that, actually, because of the costs. What we suggest people do is this: two things. First of all, most people's homes, whether we're talking about the heat use or the electrical use in general, most people's homes are running at approximately the efficiency of their automobile engine, which is at about 20%. In other words, of all the energy that you purchase by paying your utility bill, 80% of that energy is lost before you actually use it. And it's a pathetic truth, okay? And, so if you're going to let's say if I look at my electric bill and I'm using X number of kilowatt hours a month, okay, and then if I just go out and build a solar system that's going to replace that energy, and that might cost me $25,000 or $30,000 to replace that much energy. However, if I first go through my house and do an analysis of where my house is wasting energy, in other words, I maybe I put $5,000 into upgrading the whole insulation package of my house so that heat doesn't leak out as easily. Maybe I change my light bulbs over to LEDs so that they use less energy. Maybe I go to the market and buy a new heat pump water heater, which will draw about 80% less electricity to make the same amount of hot water, and so on. And I make a number of these, judicious energy appliance replacements. Now I have the same exact lifestyle, but now I could actually convert my house to run on solar with maybe only a $10,000 solar system. And so my return on investment is much sooner and everything else, but it would still, even if I didn't do that, my utility bills would go down. And so if I just wanted to save money on a monthly basis, that would be good. If I could get rid of 50% of my utility bills, that, without changing my lifestyle, with having the same amount of hot water for showers, same lighting in all the rooms, etc., the house stays warmer longer with the furnace and cooler longer with the air conditioner, and so on. So these appliances don't have to run as often. Then that's a lot of energy that I don't have to pay for anymore. And the reason I don't have to pay for it anymore is that I'm not wasting it. Okay, and this is an important step. So at that point, you may still want to buy a whole bunch of solar, but it wouldn't necessarily be to completely eliminate your utility bills as much as to be independent in case of emergencies or something else. There may be other reasonable reasons for you to want to be completely energy independent other than the economics of it.
Energy independence, I think a lot of it has to do with, that there is, whether you're into the politics of it or not, there is a doom and gloom scenario out there where a lot of people have picked up on this prepping angle. I mean, frankly, there is some concern among a lot of people that there might be a breakdown of society, and our dependence on the grid and so forth makes us vulnerable to the immediate impact of such a thing. So the idea of being energy independent or being able to decentralize our distribution of energy is a common theme that is attractive to this audience. But again, nobody out here has tons of dough they can throw at the prevailing technologies that are available to them today. I mean, there are probably many in this audience who would love to have the electric company come out and pull that meter off the side of their house. They would just get the biggest giggle out of doing it.
You bet.
But the entry costs for most are prohibitive.
That's true.
And I think what a lot of people are hoping for, frankly, is magic. They're hoping that somebody like a Rossi or a Defcalion or one of these guys is going to come up with some little box that's maybe a little bigger than a bread box that they can stick down in their basement that will produce enough electricity and or thermal energy or whatever that they can run their household in a totally off-grid scenario. Are there technologies out there that you're aware of that make you hopeful that such a scenario may come to fruition?
Well, there are definitely technologies out there that can do that, okay? But I don't have any confidence that any of them will be brought to market so that people can just go to Walmart and put it in their shopping cart and walk home and install it. That is what is prohibitive. Nobody's been stopped from running, astonishing experiments in their garage. And there are electric motors that I'm aware of that can produce 3 or 4 times more mechanical energy than they operate on. There are electric generators that can do the same, produce 4 times more electricity, 4 times more electricity than the mechanical energy it takes to run them. And when you mate these two things, then you can get a self-sustaining combination. But again, these are prototypes. These are right now research devices, and they're not an article of commerce at this point. In other words, they're not available in the open economy. And see, this is why some of us have stopped trying to work on any specific invention, and have started trying to educate the public as to these broader energy principles, so that they can start with the budget they have to lower their dependence on these absurdly inefficient technologies that we're constantly forced to purchase. I mean, you can go to Home Depot right now and buy a brand new water heater, when you open the thing up, it's got about 1 inch of insulation in there, between the hot water tank, or 2 inches of insulation, which is equivalent to about an R10 insulation package. And then they tell you that the water in there is supposed to be kept at 120 degrees, and the basement room that it's probably going to be kept in is going to be 65 degrees. So you're trying to maintain, about a 55 degree differential between the room and the water heater. And you're going to use some hot water in the morning to take a shower and then you're going to go to work, and then you're going to come home and you're going to use some to run the dishes and stuff at night. But the water heater is expected to keep the water hot at 120 degrees all day. Well, guess what? You need an insulation package of about R100 in around that tank to hold that heat in. Otherwise, R10 or R15 is going to allow most of the heat that you put into it to leak out. And this is why your hot water costs you so much, is because you're constantly making hot water all day when you're not there, and the heat is leaking out slowly into the basement, where it just dissipates into the cold, cement floor. Okay? That's the kind of waste I'm suggesting that it doesn't take a lot of energy or cost in money or time to remedy. And you can lower your utility bills easily using known principles, and give yourself, that portion of energy, for free. In other words, the energy that's free for you is the energy that you aren't wasting. It's a simple idea.
Well, it's a strong argument, and it's an argument that we've heard from conservationists for many years. And of course, a lot of us employed such techniques decades ago, and and now we're looking to move to the next step. In my own case, this old 1958 little brick box I live in has been significantly upgraded since I've lived here to make it as energy efficient as possible. And while my neighbors all around me are paying, $400 a month for their electric bill, mine's down around $200, even though I run, many computers and use electricity like a pig.
Right.
So, I don't get me wrong. I mean,
But see, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Gary.
works. Conservation works.
works.
And yes, we do need to be a lot more careful. Americans are spoiled. We tend to use energy like there's no tomorrow, like there's just no end to the supply. And because of that, we spend a lot more on energy than anybody else in the world. And pulling in the need is a very necessary first step. But I want to know, I'm asking for the experimenters that are in this audience, and there's a lot of them out there. Like, a lot of hands-on kind of guys. The guys who will go out into their garage with a hammer and whatever, and try to put some nifty widget together. You've been around this genre for a long time. You've seen a lot of interesting gizmos, some of which worked and some of which I suspect were serious disappointments.
You bet.
If you were going to make a recommendation to the guys in this audience who are of that mind, they've already done the conservation stuff. Now they're looking to move on. They want to move to the next step. What kind of gizmos would you be recommending to them that they investigate to try and make it to that next step?
Well, the first thing I would do, honestly, is I would suggest to the tinkerers, okay, that the amount of time and energy it takes to develop an energy power supply is considerable. And one of the examples I use is that you can go to a place like Office Depot, for instance, and buy a ballpoint pen for 25 cents or 30 cents or whatever the cost is. And but if I went into a machine shop to build a one-off ballpoint pen from scratch parts, it might cost me $500,000 and take 6 months. Okay, and that's just a ballpoint pen, and I know everything about the ballpoint pen. Okay, but if I don't understand the specifications, okay, then I won't understand the exact window of where all the parts come together. In other words, how do I go into a machine shop and fabricate a 1/2 millimeter perfect sphere out of brass? Okay, I know that that's the part I need to make, but I don't know how to make one. Okay, and this is the problem that the tinkerers and the hobbyists have. Okay, they have an unrealistic vision of what they're going to be capable of doing, actually, because I don't believe most of them have either the skill or the math or the theory or the scientific education to really know what it would take to build something that wasn't a little bit beyond a spoon or a fork, literally. And I'm not trying to be negative, but what I would recommend to people, if they want to do a reality check, tell them that the goal here is simply build yourself a working internal combustion engine from scratch. In other words, drink a lot of beer and melt down the cans and get the aluminum and forge yourself an engine block, okay? And then make a crank shaft, and and I'll let you even buy the bearings, okay? So you don't have to build the bearings from scratch. But I'm just saying that the amount of energy and the amount of time and skill and patience and machine tools and other things that it would take just to build your own, lawnmower engine are enormous. Okay, and I want people to hear that it is unrealistic for them to believe that they're going to just come up with some bright idea, go into the shop, and end up with, a self-running machine that runs on some new principle and taps some new form of energy that no one else has ever heard of. If it's a mechanical device, at least it's going to be an enormous amount of work. And I think this is one of the reasons why people have been hoping that something electronic, just a circuit, that somebody can publish the schematic for, will eventually come forward. But I'm actually looking at I'm hoping that the breakthroughs are going to be coming in the mechanical realms, because there are some astonishing science that's being brought forward from a number of the presentations that were made at the conference we just gave in June, which suggests that things like mechanical amplifiers, in other words, a machine where you can put 1 horsepower in mechanically and run it through a mechanism and actually end up with 2 horsepower or 3 horsepower at the end. And if this sort of thing can be perfected, then it may be possible that people could go into their garage and build something. But I don't think we're there yet, Gary. I really don't.
So there's, as far as there's no mystical circuit. I mean, we've seen so many. We've seen Ainsley and we've seen Stifler and so on. I mean, there's many of them out there. Many of them appear to do some very interesting tricks. I mean, I've seen some of these Stifler designs that appear to light a heck of a lot more lights than what I could light off of the AA battery.
Same battery,
or whatever.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, there are some interesting things being shown. Now, I've not seen anything where the energy is just coming out of free space. Now, we also hear about this mystical ether energy that's out there, and we should be able to focus that somehow and find unlimited ether energy. I keep hearing people talking about that. Haven't seen a clear definition of that either. Or have you seen anything in that area?
Well, just the historic, stories. But again, I try and steer people away from those types of things. I think you're pretty right on by calling them mystical, and I don't think this is reasonable. There's too many unknowns, in a situation like that for the average person to just stumble upon the answer that has been hidden from people who've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars looking for it. So I try and steer people completely away from that sort of endeavor. That's may as well just buy lottery tickets.
Okay, so the idea of amplification of energy is, in your mind, possible. You've seen some interesting examples of that, be it mechanical energy or perhaps in the case of Stifler, some of his circuits that seem to do some interesting tricks. But as far as just pulling energy out of nowhere, you ain't seen nothing like that.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I have seen a number of machines that, for instance, that are mechanical. I've been to Serbia and been in the shop of a gentleman named Veliko Milkovic, and he has a website, velikomilkovic.com, where he shows a device he calls his two-stage oscillator. And what he does is he creates an oscillation between gravity and centrifugal force in the machine. And it produces a periodicity whereby the one side of the machine becomes heavier and then lighter and then heavier and then lighter. And he is able to take energy out of this. And the amount of energy it takes to create these oscillations is about 10% of what you can get out. And he's hooked these things to water pumps and other things like this, where normally you would have to, spend a great deal of energy to operate the pump. You can sit in your easy chair and just every once in a while flick a big heavy pendulum to swing, and the swinging pendulum does the work. And so there are some, I recommend that people learn about these real systems that actually take advantage of these natural energy inputs, and let Tesla said that one day we would connect our machines to the very real work of nature. And this is what we should be trying to do, not come up with some mystical new thing that nobody really knows whether it's there or not. There are huge, sources of energy and well-known forces that are available, such as gravity and centrifugal force, which can be tapped as force multipliers in machines. And I am just trying to steer people's attention towards what is a very, very promising avenue of research, as opposed to following up on a story of an inventor, who has a machine, and it either works or it doesn't, and we don't know why it might work or why it might not, or whether the person is lying or just creating wild stories on the internet or whatever else. Okay.
Or just doesn't know how to read his meters.
Or just doesn't know how to read his meters. Right. There's way too much of that. And the only way to really move forward in this field is for people to learn the basics for themselves, so that when they look at these stories, they can just say, oh, well, that one doesn't really have any real energy source available to it, so that's obviously not true. We're not looking to create a machine that doesn't, that has no known energy source, like the supposed perpetual motion machines. Okay, any real perpetual motion machine has a real source of energy, I guarantee you, but it's probably provided by the environment, and it can be provided by the environment indefinitely, and that's the kind of free energy machine we're looking for, and it's we have to demystify our ideas of these things, so that we can, because I think that's where progress will be made.
All right. Well, now over your head on the picture that I'm projecting right now, I have a URL, opensystemthermodynamics.com. Now, if folks take advantage of that URL and mosey on over there, explain to folks just what it is they're going to find.
Okay. This is a lecture that I gave at the conference, and it is about an hour and 40 minutes, and it is a PowerPoint presentation where I basically start at the beginning of the story of fire and heat, and I go through the entire history, obviously in a relatively short period of time, of the development of our understanding of fire and heat and what it can be used for. And I show the development of classical thermodynamics, and then I show what came out in the 1970s with open system thermodynamics, and then I show exactly how we can use these principles to build machines that not only use energy once, but use energy multiple times, and also have commerce by gaining energy from the environment over and above what we're putting into them. And in this way make real machines that have useful outputs which are far in excess of what we are putting in. And when some of those types of energies are recycled around to the beginning, you can make fully self-running machines. And I show that I show patents that have issued on machines that recycle mechanical energy, that recycle heat, that recycle electricity. And so these are general principles that people have to understand, that these are real, that it can be done, and that machines have been patented that do these things. And that if we take a number of these ideas and bring them together, we can build an extraordinary machine that starts recycling two forms of energy, such as mechanical energy and heat. And when you put together something like this, then you can build a machine that operates on the heat of the ambient air and runs itself and produces excess mechanical energy. And this is what Tesla was trying to do.
If I wanted to avail myself of the business opportunity you offer there, I mean, what you're offering is the presentation in DVD format, and
actually it's in a digital download format.
Okay. It's a digital download, and the price on this for the folks who might be interested
is $17.
Well,
and you can have it right away.
That seems reasonable enough.
Yeah.
So
we're trying to educate people
from anybody. You know?
Exactly. So I mean, we're trying to share. We're trying to share. Obviously, we have production costs and all these types of things. But yeah, these are highly organized presentations with multiple references to issued patents and university studies and all of these different things which show these principles in operation, and that these are where we should be looking for understanding how to build free energy machines. And we don't need some new ZPE or orgone or ether or any of these other things which are not well understood.
Now, I've got to ask you, because obviously the question comes up all the time. And frankly, people keep asking me this question, and I don't have a decent answer for them. Okay, a lot of things have been attributed to this fella Tesla, and obviously the guy was a genius. He came up with he came up with stuff that we're still using today. So anybody who comes up with something that's still in use 100 years later, pretty sharp fella, and it's a shame that. His name isn't better known. But an awful lot of mystique has grown up around this guy, particularly in the free energy arena. Are you aware of anything that man published that led you to believe that he had some kind of free energy widget in his hip pocket that he was just going to, plant in the ground and pull energy out of nowhere?
Well, he was his work with the magnifying transmitter around the turn of the century, which was the 1800s turning into the 1900s. He was planning to broadcast electric power to a distance. He thought he could broadcast it all around the world, and power lights and other appliances in people's homes.
But now, if I understand what you're talking about correctly, what that was a distribution system, not a generation system.
That's true. He was going to take power from the Niagara Falls power plant and broadcast it to everybody in the world. Okay. But he would have been that the idea was that he believed he was going to be able to produce more benefit at the end than was going into the machine. In other words, that he was going to take 10,000 horsepower out of Niagara Falls and broadcast that around the world, and that's what the idea of the magnifying transmitter was that if you would add up all the benefits from all the receivers, you might have been able to end up with 100 or 1,000 times more energy than what he was putting in.
Is there any evidence that might bear that out?
Well, no, not right now. I mean, I have the only person I know who has built a magnifying transmitter in our lifetime is Eric Dollard, and he was a guest on your show a couple of weeks ago. But I have lit light bulbs in my hands next to some of his machines, where literally I was just holding the outer base of a 300-watt light bulb, and a friend of mine came and touched the bottom of the light bulb to make the other connection, and it lit to full brightness in my hand. And this wasn't a fluorescent bulb. This was a filament bulb.
It was a resistive load.
Resistive load, and this thing lit to full brightness, 300 watts in our hands. There was no shock. There was no anything. Okay, and that was near the transmitter. So, and to the best of my knowledge, it didn't draw anything more from the wall when it did that.
And I must admit myself to having played with a device that was shown by a fellow by the name of Mile, I think is how he says his name, that did allow me to broadcast minute amounts of power, relatively short distances. I mean, it was a very interesting experiment. It still to this day leaves me scratching my head how it worked. But yeah, I am familiar with the theories, I guess, of transmitting electricity wirelessly, or perhaps with only one connector to ground. Very familiar with that. I have experimented with that a little bit myself. It's interesting, but so far I've not seen any practical use for it, and I've not been able. One thing I can tell you for certain: when I had my little transmitter set up, I would set up one receiver and I'd light a little LED, and then I'd set up a second receiver, light a second LED, and the first one dimmed. So I could not prove to my own satisfaction that there was any multiplication of the input energy being observed.
In the Myel system, I agree with you.
I mean, to be honest with you, my opinion, and $5 get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. But I looked at that one, and some of what I saw made me scratch my head, but I didn't see anything to me that looked like it was magic.
Right. No, I agree, and that's I think that's what I'm trying to bring to your listeners right now is that what we need to do is specifically move away from looking for magic. I think that's one of the things that has slowed us down, and and waiting for somebody else to figure out whether something works or not, like what Sterling's doing. He's running around. I mean, my God, the guy zooms all over the place trying to find working technologies.
And I'll tell you, there is just absolutely nothing too wacky for Sterling to go take a look at.
Well, and this is the point that nothing is. I mean, I'm sure he's seen some extraordinary demonstrations. I have no doubt about it. I have seen extraordinary demonstrations myself, but I've never seen anything get close to the market as far as becoming available for sale, where I can just walk up and buy one and stick it in my basement and use it like a lawnmower, where nobody's going to bother me if I lower my power bill with it. And I think people have to have a realistic idea about how jealously the people who sell us power, are holding on to their market.
What about all the rumors that keep flying around that that the government is sequestering alien technology and they got flying saucers and all this nonsense? Have you seen anything or talked to anybody who's seen anything in that arena that might be interesting?
No, and I think you've characterized it pretty well.
Hey, the stories keep coming out. I had to ask.
Yeah, the thing is that and see, this is the other thing is that there's a lot of people out there who just think that we're gonna be saved from ourselves by the Space Brothers, who are going to hand us a working free energy machine, which is obviously how they're flying their saucers around, by the way, and and this is going to be our salvation, and I think this is really dangerously stupid. to think this way. That all of the technologies that I've been tracking for the last 35 years are guaranteed 100% developed by humans, by the humans, for the humans, of the humans, you know.
And there's a Nazi base on the moon.
Yeah, you know, it's just, you know, I have not seen that. You know, I've not been invited there, you know, to give an analysis.
All right, so you haven't had any personal tours of Area 51 or anything?
No.
Doggone it! You didn't get the memo, did you?
I did not get the memo. It's just like, you know, I didn't give the donuts to the guys out front, which is why we're on the phone. You know, it's just like, you know, I'm just a prosaic guy who thinks that humans are smart enough to figure this out. And
you said something that rang real true with me. I mean, so many people out there think that Superman or Green Lantern is going to come save us from ourselves, and it's about time they pick themselves up off their ass and save themselves, because Superman and Green Lantern ain't going to come around.
I'm not expecting them, exactly.
It's up to us. It's up to us.
It's up to us, and that means, you know, that when we finally see that it's up to us, then what we need to do is start making the moves that we can make with the resources that we do have. And this is why, you know, we promote not only these energy recycling and energy from the natural world, you know, types of technologies like heat pumps and other things like this, but also to, you know, systematically go through, you know, your place and institute as much conservation as you can. I mean, you can buy paint now that acts as insulation. You just paint it on, and you've added R5 to the wall. I mean, you know, I mean, periodically you're going to paint anyway. Gee whiz! Come on, let's. There's spectacular technologies now.
Spend the extra $5 a gallon and get the good stuff, huh? Exactly.
And this is what we need to do. We need to stop waiting for, you know, Sterling to finally come on this program and announce, you know, that there's something, you know, that's going to save us. Because even if it's true, Gary, the minute, you know, everybody believes that, believe me, that company's going to be swamped with orders. You're not going to get one that fast.
Damn it.
Okay?
Say, the end cap at Walmart's going to be empty when I roll by, huh?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Peter Lindemann, I tell you, we ran a little bit longer than I had intended, but, you know, frankly, the discussion was very interesting to me. Frank, I don't even care what the trolls in the audience had to say. I found it a very, very interesting discussion. But at this point, I should probably ask you, please, for a summary remark. This should give you an opportunity to summarize your thoughts about what we discussed tonight, and then I would like to turn it over to the audience for some questions.
Sure, no problem. Basically, my summary is that we have technologies available to us right now to radically lower our energy costs, and that should be considered the first step in becoming energy independent. As soon as you really cut the way you waste energy out of your life and out of your house and out of your car and out of all of the appliances that you are constantly paying for, then the cost of moving to an available alternative are dramatically lower. And that this is the way to energy independence as it exists today in 2013. I also recommend that people learn about the ideas of open system thermodynamics, that there are legitimate ways to recycle energy, and there are legitimate ways of tapping environmental sources to make our machines much more efficient, and in this way also lower our general energy costs without actually lowering our energy use. And this is the way that I believe society will eventually move into a free energy future. And that's pretty much it.
All righty. Well, that was a hell of a presentation, and to the audience, anybody who might be interested in perhaps crossing Peter's palm with a few bucks and buying his presentation, $17, very reasonable price. I mean, so often I feel like the presenters are trying to gouge somebody, but you're not even asking for a case of beer money. So that's really quite reasonable. It's OpenSystemThermodynamics.com. Slide over to the website. If you found Peter's presentation interesting and you would like to have more, that's where you can get a piece of the action. Now, to the audience, we've taken up more than an hour of Peter Lindemann's time. I do want to involve the audience in this conversation. I can tell you right off the bat, Peter, there has been a number of questions about LENR. I think there's a number of people out there that want to hear your impressions of all the press that's been going on related to this LENR phenomena. We got Rossi, we got the Martin Fleischmann Foundation showing a very academic type experimental device. We've got Def Callion. We've got a couple of people out there who are talking like they might actually have that gizmo sitting on the end cap at Walmart. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, to be honest, Gary, I don't follow that line of news. I'm 100% convinced that it's a genuine technology, and I have been watching what's been going on, but I also believe that the markets are not going to open to the general sale of these technologies to the public, and that's just my my political bias. I don't see that there has been any movement or green light given at the government level or economic level or finance level to allow these types of technologies to enter the market for general distribution. And so I'm not watching the LENR
so you're not
development.
You're not staking out the end cap at your local Walmart, just waiting for one to drop down there, huh?
Nope, I'm not.
Okay. What about the Richard Clem engine? Are you familiar with that technology?
I am familiar with the Clem engine, yes.
Any thoughts on that one? We've got at least one experimenter in the audience who currently has a prototype that he's playing with where he's getting some very interesting results. I mean, he's not claiming, that magic as yet, but he is getting some results that are shocking. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the Clem engine was designed specifically to use centrifugal force as a force multiplier in the system, and so what you see in this spiral conical member that spins up to high speed with very, very high pressure hydraulic fluids in it, that the pressures in the hydraulic fluid are partially put in by the front pump and partially increased by the centrifugal forces that the fluids are exposed to at the outer rim of that conical section, and therefore the drive momentum that can be generated when that fluid comes out the end nozzles to produce the reaction force should be higher than what is put in by the initial pump. And so that is the kind of machine that I think has a great deal of promise, because you can understand the gain mechanisms which should be available to it if it's engineered properly. So knowing what I know, I like it.
Got a question here from Maury King. He's a very, very well-known fellow out there.
Yeah, I know Maury.
Regularly in the office. He wants to know if, to the best of your knowledge, was the Ed Gray motor over Unity. Every time I say the word over Unity, my teeth itch a little bit. But
they should.
Yeah,
okay.
You know what he's talking about, right?
Yeah, I do. I do know. To the best of my knowledge, Maury, the answer is yes, in the sense that the machine, the EMA for dash 3A or whatever that model was that was shown in June of 1973 was capable of producing about 45 horsepower on a dynamometer and keeping its batteries charged. And the method by which that was done remains an unknown secret. For all of the research that has been done on that by a friend of mine named Mark McKay, who in the last 10 years has actually interviewed everybody who's still alive, who was there and in the day. The story that comes out about what that technology was, how it worked, who was involved, and so on, is very, very much different than what was in the news stories in the 70s. The news stories in the 70s were pretty much a PR fabrication by Ed Gray, and that isn't really what happened. But the real story is actually much wilder and much more believable from what we know. And a presentation was made on this research at our conference last year in 2012, and is also available as a lecture called "The Real History of the Ed Gray Motor." So we have tracked that down to the best of our knowledge, and we don't expect anybody to ever redevelop that. Very unlikely.
Okay, let's see here. I've got something about secrets of cold electricity, but I'm not sure that was really framed as a question.
I'm the author of that book, so...
okay.
Yeah,
maybe he's giving you a plug. I don't know.
Well,
that's Maury again. Apparently Maury's out there giving you a plug, but he didn't give a website.
Thanks, Maury. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I authored the book, "The Free Energy Secrets of Cold Electricity," which was a thesis on how the Ed Gray motor worked, and it is substantiated significantly by other people who had seen Ed Gray's systems back in the 70s, including John Bedini and a number of others. And no one has come up with a better explanation, but all attempts to build a working machine based on that thesis have so far failed.
All right. Well, now, seeing as how it's been put out there, you want to plug that book? Is there a website where if somebody wanted it, they could go buy it?
Yeah, they can buy that book at free-energy.ws/products.
Okay, so if anybody's intrigued and might like to toss a couple extra bucks in Peter's pocket, he probably deserves it. I'm sure it took him a little while to put all his thoughts together and write that book. So darn it, if you're interested, head on over there and lay a few bucks down and enjoy. Let's see here. Well, this is a question from somebody who's trolling and just trying to make you look bad.
Cool.
But it's okay. I mean, we feed the trolls here. We like to fatten them up so that when we get hungry, they're ready for barbecuing.
Yeah.
Let's see.
In the morning, I do look bad, so it's okay.
But the question is Peter Lindemann using a energy-saving device on his home at this moment? Now, he did frame that energy-saving. I bet you've put extra insulation and good windows on your place, ain't you?
Well, if I owned the house I'm living in currently, I would have for sure. Currently, I'm actually renting a house. I'm in between. I got out of the market when it was high and never really got back in. I'm spending so much time in the publishing business right now that my wife and I have not decided what we want to do or where we want to be, so we haven't bought another house. I would love to. I can tell you, I would love to be using all of the methods that I'm talking about in my own home. It's just that I don't own that home yet, unfortunately.
All right. Well, we answered that question. Let's see. Now, listen, guys. The questions moved up across the screen so darn fast, and I am getting kind of old, so I may have missed a couple of really, really, really good questions. If you had one you put out there that did not get answered, please reframe your question. But now I would like to wrap our segment with Peter here within the next couple minutes. So if you got a really good question that did not get addressed, here's some. Plasma magnets, any use for them? Plasma magnets. I'm seeing a lot of interesting experiments going on with plasma, but I am aware that a plasma is magnetic. It can be influenced by magnetic fields. It can be directed by magnetic fields, but I have never actually seen plasma used as a magnet. Are you aware of anything like that, Peter?
No, never heard of it before.
Okay,
and like you said, plasma, usually is a passage of current through some sort of glowing atmosphere. So yes, plasmas can be steered by magnetic fields and other things like that, but I've not heard of a plasma magnet before. I'm sorry.
All righty. Any other good questions for Peter before I cut him loose? He's been very generous with his time, and I don't want to overstay our welcome. Anybody out there? Gray's patents don't replicate. Many have tried. Plasma magnets, dude. Check out our sun. There's a couple arguments on the sun. We're going to have to, crack a couple beers, Shubas, and I'll tell you some of the latest theories about how the sun works, and it has very little to do with plasma, but that's okay. Let's see. What is his opinion on source fields by LaPointe? LaPointe, I think is how he says it. Source fields. It's a recent in vogue publication. I've read it and I'm somewhat familiar with it. I don't know if you've read LaPointe or not.
I'm sorry, I have not.
Okay.
I've been working on these very, very prosaic things.
It's another theory of everything. Let's see. It's referred to as primer fields. There's been half a dozen articles about it. But it is kind of out there. Interesting, though. Very interesting.
Well, I can tell you this, that I've studied a lot of Wilhelm Reich, and I've studied a lot of Tesla, and there's a lot of overlap, in the basic understanding that there is a generally biological energy field that science has been systematically ignoring. Okay, and I'm very, very sure that this field exists, and has a number of very important properties, and energy machines can be made that tap into this and run on this energy source. But again, in a general sense, that is just another form of energy that's available in the environment, and that the more the unknowns about that energy. In other words, if we don't understand its character, if we don't understand how it behaves in certain situations, if we don't know what it does, if we push on it, does it pull us or does it push back? And so on. If we don't understand how it behaves, then it's very difficult to engineer things that will interact with it in a beneficial way. And that's why I again have focused on the simple forms of environmental energy, such as heat, mechanical energy, and electricity, as the ones that we know the most about, and therefore are the most reliably understandable to create gains in common machines.
All righty, guys. I'm looking at the chat room trying to find one more really kick-ass question for Peter, but I ain't seeing it. So either you guys have gone to sleep or we've run through all the questions. Going once, going twice. All right. Peter Lindemann, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Smart Scarecrow Show. I hope you enjoyed your visit here.
Absolutely.
I found the presentation a little academic, but believe it or not, don't tell anybody. I quit Mensa in 1982 because I didn't want to belong to a club that would have me as a member. I actually understood what you were talking about. Some of these poor guys have no idea.
Well, I try. The thing is that we do need to know a little bit about science to make sense of these things, and that's part of what I'm trying to do. You know, there is a minimum amount to know. You know, I mean, you know, even to boil water on your stove in the kitchen, you know, you got to know not to put your hand on the burner. You know, it's just otherwise the benefits go down rapidly. So I appreciate that, Gary. This has been a delightful experience, and I really appreciate you know, the conversation we've had and what I've been able to convey to your audience.
I have to apologize a little bit for butting in so many times. You know, and I want to reassure the audience that, you know, if you do go to if you go to opensystemthermodynamics.com, you'll actually be able to enjoy Peter's presentation without, you know, some old Southern boy with a head full of straw interrupting him every 5 minutes. I do appreciate you being patient with my quizzical nature. And I think at this point, sir, I will let you have the rest of your evening to yourself, because it is quitting time for me.
Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for a good evening.
It's been a pleasure. Good night, sir.
All right, good night.
All righty, and that was our feature presentation for the evening with Peter Lindemann. Now, I know a lot of folks in the audience are going to be, you know, somewhat disappointed that he did not come to you and say, hey, here's your magical black box that you can stick down in your basement and run your home off of it. He's presenting a message that is really very sensible. The impact you can make by reducing your energy use is probably going to give you a faster return on investment than buying a whole bunch of gadgets, going out into your garage and trying to build some fancy widget. But I will take exception to Peter in that you experimenters out there who are handy, have the ability, and have dreams. Keep dreaming. Keep building. Have fun with it. You know, look at it as your hobby. Everybody needs a hobby. You know, I mean, you know, everybody needs a good reason to get up in the morning. And if your reason for getting up in the morning is to go out in the garage and put together a Clem engine or try to reproduce Gray or whatever, you have at it. Don't let Lindemann talk you out of trying. Damn it. Because you just never know. One of these days, one of you guys might just surprise me, Lindemann, and everybody else in the world. It could happen. Maybe. Hey, I'm hoping. But that's going to have to be it for the Smart Scarecrow tonight. We've run a little bit long. It's been one of those evenings. You know, I was enjoying his talk. He actually had a very cogent, very sensible argument that I found interesting. I wanted to hear what he had to say. But at this time, I will take any last-minute questions or comments that you may wish to direct at me. So if you want to say something nasty about my mama, now is the time. When will I have Marco Roden? I've sent a couple of emails to Marco Roden asking if he might be interested in doing a Smart Scarecrow show, and so far I've not gotten any reply. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if Marco Roden even reads his own email. For all I know, he's got a proxy somewhere who's handling that for him. I just don't know. Needless to say, Marco Roden, if you happen to be watching this show, I've got an audience here who's very interested in what you're doing and would love to hear you come on and give us a presentation. But, it's like everything else. I can't go chase these guys with a net and drag them in kicking and screaming. If Marco Rodin wants to put on a presentation for this audience, you betcha he's got an invite. Let's see here. Stop cutting your hair, hippie. I don't know. I may go back to the ponytail one of these days. The ponytail comes and goes. It depends on my mood of the day. Let's see. It would be great to show what I'm doing in my garage, but not quite together. Yeah, I know you're adding on to your garage. Invite Stephen Greer. I don't know. Is Stephen Greer someone who would be of interest to this audience? I mean, it's not really free energy. It's he's more into the alien thing, isn't he? I mean, isn't he? Well, Daniel Nunez, that's somebody I'd like to have do a presentation. Stephen Greer, I mean, frankly, he's a very bright fella, and he puts on a hell of a presentation. I just, I didn't think he was, I didn't think his material was really relevant for this venue. But if you guys are interested, I'll put the invitation out there. Let's see. When Zero shows up with his test equipment, okay. Let's see here. Any other questions or comments that only I can handle? I'm not seeing them. Alrighty, I think that's going to be it, guys. Hey, I want to thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening watching the Smart Scarecrow Show. I hope you enjoyed it. But I'll tell you, it's been a long one. Time for me to hit the sack. Good night, all. We'll see you next week.